thing better record, because if not, I'm going to be upset, and that ain't no joke. All right, guys, lecture 4. We continue our conversation with Islam moving throughout Afro-Eurasia. That word itself is something you better get used to, because Afro-Eurasia could be the way that they ask a question on the AP exam, essay or multiple choice. And if you don't know what Afro-Eurasia is, then that could be a problem. So it's just the 3 continents of Africa, Europe, and Asia, okay? Sometimes you'll get a question that says Eurasia. So that's Africa, being excluded from that group, okay? So the conversation has been Islam leaving the Arabian Peninsula and moving throughout the Afro-Eurasian world. And now we're going to get to it penetrating down into the Sahara Desert and creating some empires that we got to talk about in West Africa, okay? First things first. Africa is probably one of the most complicated geographical places that you need to know, okay? In the sense that when you get to Latin America, it's just Latin America, that's it. But the question on the AP exam can actually cut up Africa in a lot of different ways. One way they like to do it is to divide it in half. And they'll say North Africa, or they say Sub-Saharan Africa. If they say Sub-Saharan Africa, basically means everything outside of North Africa, like it's south of that, okay? But where it gets to kids sometimes on essays and questions and stuff like that is when you go, hey man, write an essay about West Africa. And you're like, oh man, I'm good. I'm going to write about Egypt. Hey man, that was awesome. You were dropping some knowledge. The only problem is that Egypt is not in West Africa. So everything you wrote was a waste of time. Or you write about the Swahili coast, and that's East Africa. So you got to get it right. You got to know what empires are in what areas. And if you were in class in a normal year, I draw my maps up on the board. It takes me about an hour and a half. It has all different lines and colors and where Buddhism is going and this, whatever. And I have that on there for like 2 months, bro, as I lecture over a variety of things. And kids are like, Mr. B, when the AP exam happened, I just closed my eyes and I just pictured your sorry map with whatever the hell that camel looked like that you drew up. It had like 3 humps and not even on the right side. It was like something crazy, guy. But I remember that map for the AP exam. Now, during the pandemic, we ain't got no map on the board because I'm only teaching like 4.5 kids and everybody else is online and I can't even see you. So that means the geography component for this class is going to be on you guys to like just make the connection, okay? So, like always, I like to give you like a little heads up in terms of what the College Board gives me as my mandate to lecture you guys about. This is basically empire building. This is basically telling me, hey, what did states in West Africa do in order to develop empires? They give me some examples that I can cover. I am going to cover Ethiopia, but later on they give me the option to talk about Mali, and I think Mali is the sexiest of all the empires in West Africa that we get to talk about, okay? Here's actually Mali right here. And here's something that you need to know. Anytime they're talking about an empire, most likely they're going to ask you like how it facilitated. And that's the word you would have to use in an essay. How do empires facilitate trade? Okay. And at the basic level, they do so by spending a lot of money on road construction, the maintenance of roads, protection of the merchants, traveling to and from, because if you don't provide protection, ain't no one going to put everything they own on a camel's culito and carry it around the Sahara Desert. So you got to be able to protect the merchants on that trade routes, okay? And the last thing is innovation. Technological innovations that allow for people to travel farther, and in this case, it's going to be camels, saddles, stirrups, and of course the caravan trade network that we talked about when we did Central Asia. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm taking notes from right now. West African empire building. Okay, and the empire that we want to talk about is Mali. Okay, now the key thing about Mali is it's going to be connected, interwoven with the development of the arrival of Islam. So that's going to be the key, because the College Board will like you to say how people, empires, how rulers, how they justify, how they bring legitimacy to their authority. Like, basically, why should you pay attention to this king? And a lot of rulers are going to use religion. And so how do the West African kingdoms use religion, specifically Islam, to justify their rule over others, okay? So the first thing we got to talk about is, how did Islam get to West Africa? Because it's a pain in the butt to get through the Sahara Desert, okay? So you need to know this. Innovations in travel, and specifically, bro, if you look at a camel, first of all, I don't even know who's the first guy who looks at a camel and wants to jump on his back, you know? But I'm sure every animal, and let me be careful how I phrase this, but every animal at one point, humans have said, hey, let's try to ride that guy. You know what I mean? And you have to make the connection that this type of horse is good. This horse that has those little lines, that guy doesn't want to be ridden. Okay, so certain animals you can use for domestication. Okay, so you have to invent a camel saddle, and I know riding a camel is difficult because I've done it. Mr. B, where have you done it? Bro, I was in the Sahara Desert. Come on now. That's a true picture of Mr. B on the trade routes of the Sahara. Mr. B, I can't see you. Well, hang on now. I'm right here. There I am right there. Mr. B, I still can't see you. What? All right, let's do a close-up. Oh, yeah. What's up, baby? Woo! Mr. B, how do I feel like you're going to try to figure out how to put this picture in every PowerPoint? Between that and the pigs, I want to put it on my PowerPoints. And I know what you're thinking. Mr. B, you're looking a little slim. I could actually see what your face looks like, especially the kids online that only see me in that little square. And sometimes I feel like my face takes up like, a square and a half. Okay? Oh, man, I can't stand Kahoot. Bro, that sound gets to me. Okay? Anyways, so how does Islam travel from the Arabian Peninsula to West Africa? Okay? So this trade route here, hugging the coastline of the Mediterranean, that was, been used for centuries, so no big deal, whatever. But the problem is, how do you travel south in the Sahara? The actual days traveling could be somewhere between 40, 45, 50 days. The camel ain't got no problem. That guy needs water like every 75 years, no problem. The person that's going to die a painful death is you. So you got to ask yourself, why would you put yourself in such agony to go down to West Africa through the Sahara Desert? There's got to be some big money stuff down there. And the answer is yes. And the commodities that you need to know are salt and gold. The salt, in fact, they actually call it the salt and gold trade. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about it later on with Mali, to see that Mali is actually going to be hugged in between where the salt is produced and where the gold is mined. And they don't actually produce the salt and some of the gold. But what they're going to do is they're going to tax the trade that goes between it, because people literally trade gold for salt. I don't know what you're thinking. Why would you trade the same amount of gold for the same amount of salt? Because salt does what? Preserve food. And so you need it. Okay. The other things that were going to be traded is slaves. Remember, you need to know this. This is a story that College Road wants you to know. That is way before the arrival of Europeans in the 15th century. There was already an African slave network. And it was predominantly to take women to the Islamic world for what? To be in the harem. Remember, the caliph and then later his nobility would require hundreds, if not sometimes thousands, for when it comes to the caliph, women as household servants, as wives, as concubines. And so there was thousands upon thousands of women leaving West Africa and finding themselves into the Islamic slave trade. Okay, now let's take a look at the empire building of Mali. Okay, because that's the big boy. Look at the geographical place of Mali. The desert area is where the salt was produced. And you can see the gold mines. Some of these gold mines are even outside of the sphere of influence of Mali. So like I said before, they taxed the trade routes in between it. Okay. Now, I know you get sick of me tiring of me saying like, oh, and they raised taxes and they collected taxes and they did things with the taxes. But please write this down. In order to solidify your authority, you probably should have a standing army. Mr. What's the difference between a standing army and any other type of fighting force, whatever? Well, let's take a look at medieval Europe. Medieval Europe, the knights, for the most part, they were farmers. They're not fighting all the time. Bro, they're farming. And then the noble lord is like, dun, 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 every 3 years when the castle's getting attacked, and then the guy takes off his little farming pajamas and gets a sword to go stab somebody in the neck. Okay, but for the most part, that guy's not training every single day. Therefore, if you have a standing professional army, that's all they do. That's all they do. So you can really expose your authority on someone by beating them down if they don't listen to you, they rebel, this or whatever. So you need to collect taxes, and specifically in like coins, like gold and silver coins, so you can pay those professional soldiers. Okay, that's why I'm always harping on, you got to collect taxes, because when you have that revenue, then you can do things like build huge works of art, giant architecture to display power, or to have a standing army to come and hit you in the neck with a hammer. Okay, now with that money, you can do other things, but that specifically is the main thing there. Okay, now my lecture notes are online. I'll put this PowerPoint online, but this is kind of like the key aspects of the Mali Empire here. A large centralized state with a bureaucracy, not a bureaucracy like we see with China, there's no civil service exam, what have you, but the Mali emperor had the type of power that we would see in, let's say, East Asia. Okay, now let's talk about the one main guy that they will probably bring up, if they do, about West Africa, and his name is Mansa Musa. He is one of the most famous African kings, okay? And he was just named a few years ago, I forgot what magazine, but he was just, oh, look at the pigs! Woo! Some of y'all weren't looking, you weren't expecting it, so let's just pretend we hadn't seen it, and then now, oh, hell yeah, the pigs make a resurgence. Some magazine just said that his wealth in modern currency would be worth $400 billion. This guy was just throwing money around, okay? Now, here's what's important about Mansa Musa. Here's, if the question comes up on the AP exam, it's going to be this story. The guy goes to Mecca, which is what Muslims should do in general. Now, the rulers of Mali converted to Islam, you need to know this, because they thought it would bring them into a better relationship with the merchants that coming down from North Africa. So it was an economic move, okay? A political move as well. So I'm going to convert to Islam so that the other Islamic empires will treat me better. They'll bring me into their sphere of influence, of trade. And you know me, I know you, and everybody loves each other, okay? The interesting thing is, the rulers of Mali did not think it necessary to force their inhabitants to convert to Islam. So unlike places that we might see in the Middle East, that we see the conversion to Islam be over 90%, in West Africa, that wasn't the case. In fact, it was probably more the upper echelon, while everybody else, away from the capital city, remained their traditional West African religious beliefs, okay? So it wasn't a problem for these rulers to have people in their empires, some Muslim, some not a big deal, okay? But they did so for the economic connection. Anyways, the guy goes on a holy pilgrimage to Mecca. And when he's there, he's throwing down some Chuck E. Cheese tokens, bro. He's just throwing down some cash flow. And everybody's like, damn, guy, where'd you get all this money? Bro, Timbuktu, guy, that's where I live. Nobody knew where that place was. But they knew where that place was after he left, because he threw down so much money, people were like, yo, bro, are you hiring over there? You got any public slots open? Because I got you, bro, let's go. So he brings back with him the best lawyers, judges, doctors, physicians, men of letters, all that. He comes back to Timbuktu. So he kind of makes it the Mecca of Africa in the sense. Like I heard that outside of China, the University of Timbuktu had more books than any other place on the planet outside of China, obviously. Okay, so what happens is not only does he go on the pilgrimage and he puts Timbuktu on the map, but now he comes back and he's such a devout Muslim because he's pumped. And apparently that's what happens to you when you go on the Hajj. Like you meet other Muslims there that are super pumped about their religion, and you come back and you're just pumped. So now he comes back to West Africa and he starts throwing all this money down to create all these universities, to create all these new mosques. Now, here's the thing that College Board might ask you. hey man, that mosque doesn't look like the mosque that I'm familiar with in the Islamic world, Mr. B. What's up with that? Well, you need to know that despite leaving their cultural homeland, every time a religion goes somewhere, they're going to build their buildings somewhere else. That's why you get that huge Hindu temple in Cambodia, where you get that huge Buddhist temple in Java. Okay, now you have mosques here in West Africa, but they are limited in their mechanisms that they make those things. So you have to use the local material. You can't just go to Home Depot and get, everybody gets the same stuff, whatever. That's why if this picture shows up of this mosque, chances are what the College Board is going to ask you is, what's up with this? Like, why is this building in West Africa? Why does it look the way it does? And you just say, hey, it's the movement of religion. It's the Islamic movement into West Africa, and this is what their mosques look like here in that region, okay? Now, let's talk about the next thing. Ibn Battuta. This guy is huge. You need to know this guy's name. There are 3 explorers you need to know. Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and Jean He. Notice that Christopher Columbus didn't make the list. Ooh, I'm sorry, my brother. Okay. And here's what's important about visitors. There ain't no DirecTV. There's no Travel Channel. There's no House Hunters International. You watch that show. Y'all watch that show? Yeah. Bro, that messes with your mind. You see the people from Oklahoma. We just wanted to try something different, so we're going to move to Bora Bora. We don't want to spend more than $4 million. And I love it because the first house they show is like 4.1 million. And they're like, oh, this is really out of our price range. I'm like, oh, I feel so bad for you. How are you going to manage? 4.1. I just, it's way over our number. Anyways, there ain't no DirecTV. There's no Travel Channel. So what do you have back in the 12, 13, and 1400s? People writing books. So Marco Polo writing a book. Ibn Battuta writing a book. It inspires. It pumps you up. The word on the street is Christopher Columbus had on his ship, the Santa Maria, had a copy of Marco Polo's travels. So that's kind of like what inspires people to do what they, in terms of traveling. So let's take a look at Ibn Battuta. First of all, that's a good-looking man. You know what I'm saying? I still think Denzel is number 1, but I'll put Ibn Battuta I'll put him in the top 10. Okay? Take a look at where he went, man. The entire Islamic world, East Asia, the guy traveled 70,000 miles. Okay? And this is not like on, United and United Airlines and stuff like that. This is guys traveling by camel. Okay? Now, he writes he writes his little documents, his travels, whatever. And there's a specific group of themes that he wants to address. Number 1, take a look at my little arrow facing Mali. One of the things that he wants to commentary on is the fact that he goes to Mali, which is an Islamic empire, and the king greets him, and the king has his daughters next to him, and they're naked. And Ibn Battuta's like lost his mind. He's like, what's going on around here? Because now by the 1300s, women in the Islamic world are what? For sure. They're veiled. That ain't no joke. They're veiled. They're secluded. Like, on the fringes of the empire, you might get some differences. But Ibn Battuta could not believe that these daughters of the king were naked. And so here's what you need to know. Sometimes local customs are strong enough to resist another culture coming in that's strong and tells you got to do this. You got to change up. And the tradition that is going to remain strong in West Africa is the tradition that women have in West Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, they have it good. If I was a woman and you want to pick somewhere you want to live, I'm not picking China. I'm not picking India. I'm not picking the Islamic world or like the Middle East. Okay, I'm not picking Europe, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. I'm picking Sub-Saharan Africa. Women are leading men into battle. Women are in charge of some of their political units. And so when Islam comes in and some of the traditions have changed and said, hey, bro, you got to make sure your women are covered, whatever. African women are like, oh, hell no. You must got us confused with somebody else, guy. Okay, and so that's going to happen there, and it's going to happen in Vietnam, and to a lesser extent, it's also going to happen in Korea, which we're going to talk about that on Friday. My Korean kids are like, "Yay! We finally made the rotation." Okay. Anyways, another arrow that popped up there is East Africa, the Swahili coast. And the one thing that Ibn Battuta is going to make reference to is the fact that, man, he sees so diverse of people in East Africa. He sees Muslims that are African, Persian, Arab, Indian, everybody living together, having good times, working together, having sex, having different kids and whatever, just mixing together. And everybody Muslim, everybody having a good time. It's such a hodgepodge of different languages and ethnic groups and stuff like that. So those are, if you see a document on the AP exam, chances are it's one of those stories, okay? So that brings me to East Africa, the Swahili coast. You need to know the Swahili coast, okay? It is a trading powerhouse, but it's going to look different from anything we've ever talked about. And that brings me to this very important word for today, and that is city-state. What is a city-state? It's basically just a city that acts as its own state. And here's the pros on this. If you're China, you got the Chinese empire, you rich, you got money, you got the mandate of heaven, you better listen to me because, you know what I'm saying? I got the mandate of heaven. How many people live in China? 100 million people at the time of the Song. Bro, that's stressful, guy. That's a lot of people to have to manage. How many people live in a city-state in the Swahili coast? 15,000. So if you're a king of a Swahili city on the eastern coast of Africa, you rich, you good to go. But you don't have the stress to deal with an empire, okay? So city-states, we're going to talk about it here in East Africa. We're going to talk about it with the Mayan, and we're going to talk about it with the Italian city-states of the 1300s, okay? So what is the Swahili coast? It's a couple things. It's a language, it's a region, and it's a culture. So when you say Swahili, it means so many different things, okay? The language itself, I don't want to call it fake, but it was manipulated. It was a bunch of Arab guys, Persian guys showing up in East Africa, and the guys in East Africa speak a Bantu language, and they're like, yo, bro, I moved down here to trade and all that, but I don't understand a damn thing what this guy is saying. So they start coming up with words, like a language that these merchants can understand. So it's infusing Bantu and Arabic languages to create a whole new language called Swahili. And the College Board wants you to know that story. How Persian and Arab guys moved to East Africa, temporary, you know, they just get a little 1 bedroom, 2 bath kind of thing, whatever, hang out for the trading, this, whatever. But then they go to the nightclub, you see what I'm saying? And they find themselves a girlfriend, and then before you know it, one thing leads to another, and then they get married, you know? And then it's like, where are we going to live? Lawrenceville or Athens, you know, raise the kids, huh? And so that Persian guy or that Arab guy now lives in a city-state in East Africa and creates a whole diaspora community. That's the word. A diaspora community of people from somewhere else living in this little enclave, this little pocket along the coast. Okay? So, what is the Swahili coast known for? That picture right there. Boats coming in with trade goods. And so this is all you need to know. Look at Mogadishu. Look at Mombasa. What they would do is turn around to the interior, and what do you think would be coming in from West Africa? Ivory, gold, salt, slaves. They turn around. They're standing now on the coast looking outward. Who's showing up on the Swahili coast? Persian guy bringing some rugs. Indian guy bringing some cotton textile. Chinese guy, well, the Chinese guy probably wouldn't sail all the way over there. He would have given it to somebody, you know, in Malaysia, whatever. But somehow Chinese porcelain shows up in East Africa. Okay? So basically, and I don't know how to spell this word, but they are the conduit between the two civilizations. They are the go-between. The Swahili guys turn around to the interior, get those stuff, turn around to the Indian Ocean basin, and they give it to those guys. Okay? And by doing so, they get super, super, super rich. Okay? Last thing for today. So far, we've talked a lot about Islam, okay? And a lot of North Africa, East Africa, West Africa do become Islamic. But there's one stronghold of Christianity, and that's going to be Ethiopia, okay? Judaism and Christianity both come to Ethiopia. Look at this map. Hang on first, let me move my fat head, okay? Look at this map, okay? Aksum is the early Ethiopian kingdom. Look at these trade routes. You can see how somebody from Jerusalem can easily end up on the east coast of Africa, there on the Red Sea shore, okay? And so guess what? And I know this is not part of the AP curriculum, but I think it's kind of cool, whatever. There's a story, and I don't know if you've ever heard this. There's a story that once the temple was destroyed, that the Ark of the Covenant was snuck out by Jews, and they made it to Ethiopia. You guys ever heard this story? Okay, there's a building today in Ethiopia where apparently they have the Ark of the Covenant in, and only one guy, the head of the church, can sit there, and nobody's allowed to go in. So nobody's allowed to see if the Ark of the Covenant is there, this, whatever. But Ethiopians make that claim. So their claim to like Ethiopia, to Judaism and Christianity goes way back, okay? Some of the early scriptures, biblical scriptures of Christianity actually survive in Ethiopia, okay? So here's the reason why this is important for our class, okay? Ethiopia is always going to be looking towards the west and say, hey, remember, we're Christian too, especially during the times of imperialism when Europeans are like gobbling up all of Africa and just taking us, whatever. Ethiopians are like, why are you trying to beat me down, guy? I'm Christian like you. In fact, I've been Christian longer than some of y'all over there. Don't want to name any names, okay? But they're going to make this claim to the past. In fact, a religion is going to develop kind of like in Ethiopia and Jamaica. Some of you guys might know it. It's called Rastafarianism, okay? So the Rastas of Jamaica. And so here's the story. Queen Sheba from Ethiopia apparently went to visit King Solomon of the Jewish tribes, you know what I'm saying? And they had some relations. And you can understand what relations mean. And then they had a kid. So that means they created a bloodline, according to the story. A Jewish Ethiopian bloodline. This ruler right here, Haile Selassie in the 1930s, is apparently the 250th descendant of Queen Sheba and King Solomon. In the 1920s, a black nationalist leader in New York City, who's Jamaican, Marcus Garvey, is going to make a speech which he says Africans of the Western Hemisphere should unite and look towards Africa for their next king and Messiah. Well, there was only one kingdom that was free of European control, and that was Ethiopia. So some guys in Jamaica look at Ethiopia and go, yo, man, Marcus Garvey talking about him. He is the next king that's going to lead us out of Babylon. And some guy goes, didn't he say he was going to be like the Messiah? And somebody goes, yeah. Haile Selassie, he's the Messiah. He's the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So a whole religion on the island of Jamaica is going to be based on the interpretation of that guy. And a whole religion develops. Rastafarianism. King of King, Lord of Lord, conquering Lion of Judah. Jah Rastafari. Perfect timing. Woo! If I was in Miami, all my Jamaicans would be like, yeah! The kids of Swanee are like, what the hell is Rastafari? Is that a restaurant? What is that? Is that in Swanee Town Center?